All right, so this is the monthly OpenBazaar developer meeting call. To anyone who's not familiar with these, once a month we meet um, here just to go over what we have been doing over the past month, talk about what we will be doing over the next month, and then hear from anyone in the community about what they've been working on or answer any questions that they might have. These are recorded and posted on YouTube for posterity's sake, as well as the chat being recorded as well. So, over the past month, there's been a lot going on. The major thing that happened, only I think a few days after we did our last developer meeting, was that the 2.3 release launched. That was a major release that was many months of work. Primarily, it fundamentally changed the way that the wallet worked. It was built on SPV wallets, and each node had one coin that it could use. And now it's changing to a multi-coin, or has changed to a multi-coin approach. So instead of being forced to use one coin, the same OpenBazaar node is able to use multiple coins. And at the launch of 2.3, we had 4 coins: Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Zcash, and Litecoin. And as I'll talk about later, Ethereum is coming soon. So that was a significant amount of work that changed a lot of the way the app worked. It also required a lot of OB1 infrastructure changes because instead of being SPV based now, it's API based, and we use the block book infrastructure for that. Even though we did a lot of testing for this, we did kind of half expect, to get some serious bugs, considering how substantial some of the issues were. But happily, it seems as though we didn't actually have that much, at least initially. I mean, we've had a few things come in that we're looking at now, but all right. So that was the sort of the big thing that happened right after the end of the last release. What we've been working on in the past month has been primarily 4 things. One is, of course, working on the next release, which is 2.3.1. 2.3.1 primarily consists of an IPFS rebase. So the current version of the software is on a relatively outdated fork of IPFS. So the rebase, we think, should improve networking because they've included a lot of stuff since we last rebased the IPFS code. In particular, it should allow for circuit relaying, which is especially important for mobile and people that don't have great connections. That is, and if someone on the call has information otherwise, let me know, but that appears to be more or less completed at this point, the rebase itself. We're now moving into the testing phase of that. Of course, because OpenBazaar is built on top of IPFS, it means that, whenever you do rebase, it touches a lot of different parts of the code. So we welcome and appreciate anyone testing from the community. And if you find anything, of course, let us know. There's only one other feature in the 2.3.1 release upcoming, and that is the ability to do bulk coin updates. So right now, if you want to, you can change what coins are accepted per listing, but for stores that have a lot of listings, that's obviously a huge pain to do. So after 2.3.1, they will have the ability to change all of their listings together at once, to change which coins are accepted altogether. So we do not yet have a release candidate out for the 2.3.1, but we're getting closer to doing that. A lot of testing going on right now. The second main thing that we have been working on is Aetherium integration. Aetherium integration is sort of a multi-part thing. Part of it is just getting Aetherium to function as a currency in the application itself. This is a lot more work than the other currencies. The other currencies are Bitcoin derivative, and Aetherium is fundamentally different enough that it requires a substantial amount of work to integrate into the client. That's getting Aetherium to work as a currency. There's also being able to use things like Aetherium tokens, and then eventually the OpenBazaar token as well, which is an Ethereum-based token. And those things are kind of what's coming next after Ethereum is usable as a currency. To do all of this, it requires a slew of smart contracts, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe external audits have been done on all of those, or almost all of those, and most of them have also had all the fixes in from getting the feedback from those audits. So that's been going well, but we did run into a problem with Ethereum integration, which was precision. Since OpenBazaar is based on Bitcoin and Bitcoin derivative coins, the level of precision we used was Satoshi level precision. However, Ethereum has a substantially higher level of precision, and that has forced us to make changes to accommodate for that, which is ongoing right now. Mike, I saw you unmute. Is there something you wanted to add on the Ethereum stuff?
The only thing I'd mention is that the audits have only been performed on the moderated smart contracts for our regular usage. I know that there are a couple of other smart contracts that we're going to be using for other aspects of the Ethereum work that are still in progress. So I don't know if that matters or not, but I figured I'd mention.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so I mentioned the precision issue that is being fixed now. Now, this Ethereum integration stuff is not going to be included in the 2.3.1. There's still a decent amount of work there to be done, and we're hoping to get the next release out, fairly quickly. We're not including the Ethereum stuff. I think it's yet to be decided whether or not 2.3.2 will have the Ethereum stuff. We're not sure what goes into that exactly, but will not be in the next release. The third primary thing we've been focused on is the mobile application. Now, the mobile app is an OB1 product, and there are major developments over the past month. We announced the branding of the application. It's called Haven, and also the focus is on making this a private online commerce application. So you're able to, it's effectively a mobile client for OpenBazaar, but one that is, more dependent on OB1 infrastructure than the reference client implementation, and with a focus on keeping users private. So limited beta testing has begun. I think all of the core functionality is complete, or very close to being complete. There is still sort of design work being done to improve the user experience, and there are also a handful of features to add, such as social. So Haven is actually going to have a few things that the desktop reference implementation does not have, such as some social features, and those are still being added now. This does require also some more OB1 infrastructure work. The social side of it is, at least initially, kind of dependent on our infrastructure, and that is being built out now as well. So we don't have sort of a projected release date for the mobile app yet, but over the next month, we do hope that we'll be able to start opening it out a little more to more sort of general testing. So if anyone's interested in doing that, let us know, and hopefully in the not too far future, you'll be able to help us test the application out. The fourth thing that we have been working on is the web application. So as everyone probably knows at this point, OpenBazaar right now is purely desktop only. Of course, I just talked about the mobile app that is nearing completion, but we're also trying to build a web version so you can access OpenBazaar through the browser. One major accomplishment happened over the past month from the Protocol Labs team. They merged in distributed hash table functionality into their JavaScript implementation of IPFS. Now, I think it's still unclear to us if that means that that is sufficient for us to actually build like a full OpenBazaar node in the browser, but it's certainly a necessary step to get to that point, to have a DHT that you can use. So that was really good to see. We had already previously made several proof of concepts for how this could be done in browser. Those are sort of showed the possibility of doing this. And right now, we're moving on to building the user interface. And the first step in using that we're starting is the Discover interface, which is where you see listings initially. So that is underway right now. All right, those are the four primary things that we have worked on over the past month. Is there anyone from the OB1 team that wants to add anything that I have missed? All right, I'm hearing silence, so I'm going to continue on to what we intend to do over the next month. Well, the obvious thing is get the 2.3.1 release finished, which includes the rebase and the features that I talked about. As I mentioned, this is very close to completion already, but needs a substantial amount of testing. So we would always appreciate more testing from users. If you want to help with that, make sure that you're in our Slack and that you're in the release testing channel, because as soon as things are built, release candidates are built, we post them there immediately. The second is on the Aetherium integration stuff that I had mentioned. The currency side first, which is, again, not in the 2.3.1, possibly the 0.2, and then token work after that. The third is the mobile app. I've already discussed that. There won't be a release over the next month, but you could use help testing, and the web app as well. It's more or less the things that we had been working on over the past month continue. And I think the 2.3.2, unless anyone on the call says otherwise, it's not clear after the 2.3.1 exactly which major issues we're going to be hitting yet. That's sort of still up in the air.
Yeah, that's correct, Sam. We haven't planned 3.23 yet.
Yeah, don't want to get the cart too far ahead of the horse. Another point of interest that is worth mentioning is the fact that there are multiple conferences that we have attended over the past month. The first was the North American Bitcoin Conference in Miami, which is where we announced, Brian announced Haven, and we had a table there in order to show people a demo of the application. The second is the Atlanta Bitcoin Conference, obviously in Atlanta. And the same sort of there was focused a lot around Haven and showing people off the application. Brian or Mike or anyone who attended those conferences, do you have anything you'd like to add about how those went?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I guess you're the only one with a mic. Anyway, I think that the conferences that we went to, we were showcasing the application were really great. We had a lot of people that have used the software over the years come and take a look at it, and it's been a long time coming to try and get something onto Android and iOS. So we're really looking forward to it. And I think if you're interested in being part of the early testing group, if you're not already, that feedback and see what people think of it as well. But overall, I mean, the response has been, it looks great, it feels great, I hope it works great. And that's the stuff we're working on now to make sure it's ready for release.
All right, thanks, Brian. I noticed a comment from Chris Troutner saying that he's been using the current release to do cryptocurrency trades and hasn't had any issues, which is great to hear. But you also brought up that listings are very slow and that Washington hinted that we're attempting to fix that. That's true, something I didn't mention. So the way, and of course anyone else is free to jump in here and explain this better than I'm about to. But right now, when we attempt to pull up a listing the first time, we make an IPNS call. That makes sure that the data that you're getting is the most up-to-date that it possibly can be. However, IPNS is very slow, at least compared. It's just slow altogether, but especially slow compared to IPFS calls. And so something that we're looking at doing is changing from the IPNS being the default call when you pull up a listing from like a search provider to being an IPFS call and just relying on the search provider to have up-to-date listings and not give you stale data. Since IPFS calls are substantially faster than IPNS calls, and I mean like a lot faster based on, this is not like official scientific testing, but anecdotally, IPNS calls often take 30 seconds to a minute, or something often very long, whereas IPFS calls often are a second or less than a second. So substantial improvements there at the cost of potentially getting stale data. Something we're looking at doing is initially doing an IPFS call and then doing an IPNS call in the background. And if, when that call resolves, the data has changed, letting the user be aware of that difference somehow. I don't, as far as I know, we haven't sort of officially started working on that yet, but it's something we're very interested in doing because we have gotten, of course, and seen that the IPNS calls can be really slow and is not a great user experience. Anyone from the team want to add anything to that or clarify what I've said? Okay, good deal. Let's see. Rod asked if the recent IPFS updates helped with how long IPNS calls take. I can't say that it has, but I haven't done any testing. I don't know if anyone here has actually formally tested it. We know that the circuit relaying stuff should help with the networking. I don't know if it helps with IPNS call speed. Anyone here know?
I believe it actually might slow it down a little bit by default with the new version because it requires more resolutions to happen before it returns a trusted record. I do think that Chris has done some work to streamline that, but I don't know. Maybe Josh, you were about to speak up and give us some realistic results based on that.
Well, I wasn't, but and Mike can fill in the details here, but my understanding was a lot of the speed improvements won't actually be that big in 2.3.1 because we need to do some, we need to actually start turning on relay modes, which will be after that. Like the tech for relaying will be in there, but we won't be necessarily using it for people using the desktop. Yeah, I lost my audio, but that's correct. The IPFS relaying is really just a compatibility release for 2.3.1, and later on we'll be able to enable some of that relay capability, hopefully shortly after that.
Yeah. So in terms of speeding up the calls, it sounds like we don't know yet, but it'll be interesting to see once the relaying capability is turned on if that makes a substantial difference or not. Chris Troutner asked to expand on the differences between Haven and OB. I will give that a shot briefly here. There is no difference on the server side, or if there are differences, they're very insubstantial. It uses the OpenBazaar Go server on the app itself. On the device itself. So you're running a full OpenBazaar Go server on your phone when you're using the Haven application. Primary difference is on the front end. So the reference client is meant to be sort of the reference implementation. You can do whatever you want with it, and it enables you to use different service providers and whatnot. The Haven application is built specific to use OB1 services, and it has a few other things that the reference client does not have. The primary thing that's different, off the top of my head anyway, is the social features. Those are built on OB1 infrastructure. They're not built on sort of core OpenBazaar infrastructure at this point. They might be introduced later on down the road. And it defaults, or it uses OB1 search. It uses the block booth wallet infrastructure. That is true of the reference client as well. And it's on obviously, the fact that it's on a mobile device is the significant difference there. So, anyone else on the OB1 side that has explanation of the difference between Haven and OpenBazaar?
Sure, I can speak to a little bit to this. So the main approach for us is the fact that we only have this open source project, OpenBazaar, that we have been incrementally improving. And as we are starting to explore business models for the sustainability long term of OB1, Haven hopes to be a little bit of a vehicle for that, while still remaining true to the open source server implementation on the background. So we will have some opportunities to look at value-added services in the mobile experience that might not ever make it to the open source solution. And some of those solutions may actually end up getting backported into the open source solution, depending on the value that they bring. But that's generally the main difference. We will not open source the client for the mobile, and we will be exploring some of those unique experiences on the mobile platform that may end up getting brought to desktop later on, but might not as well. So that's probably the key difference.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to view it. We always put forward the desktop client as a reference implementation as an example, for how OpenBazaar protocol and server side can be used. And we always expected that people would build like a custom front end into the back end. And eventually we just did it ourselves on mobile. So that's more or less Haven. And also there is a focus on privacy. Of course, on OpenBazaar we care about privacy as well, but mobile applications are traditionally pretty poor about protecting users' privacies. And in general, e-commerce platforms are poor about protecting user privacy. So we think that there's a gap there, and Haven is meant to fill the private online commerce gap. All right. That is all that I had to discuss. Is there anything else from the OB1 team that is worth mentioning? Anything I missed?
So Chris also asked a little bit of a difference, or for an explanation of the difference between IPFS and IPNS, and the short answer to that is IPNS uses the DHT, or the distributed hash table, to store and look up content, and is generally used as a pointer to the actual hash of content that you're trying to find on the IPFS network. And the IPFS network does not use the DHT at all. It uses a variety of different transports to pull the traffic from other parts of the network. And so if you were to compare IPFS and IPNS to the internet today, IPNS would be a lot more like a DNS lookup of the server it is that you're trying to access, and give you just enough information to know where that peer is in the cloud or in our network on IPFS to be able to find that. So the IPFS would actually be the node serving the content itself, rather than IPNS, in the case of IPNS, where that data or that requested information might be served by another party on that person's behalf as kind of a reference. Hopefully that was explained well.
Yeah.
I think, Mike, it's worth pointing out, if IPFS is so much faster, one might wonder, why don't we just use it all the time? And the answer there is, when we get an IPFS hash, it will resolve to a piece of content very quickly, but we have no guarantee that that's the current version of that content. So in places where getting up-to-date data is important, we use IPNS so that you don't, for instance, try to buy something that's been changed and then the purchase is invalid. So a lot of this is trying to find a balance between being fast and then making sure we don't pull cached data that's out on the network but is not actually the latest data from that node.
Yes, that's correct. In actuality, every single update that a particular node makes on the IPFS network will break the caching for all of your store state. Even if you just change a small aspect of your listing on just on one of your listings, your entire store would need to be recached by the network. So IPNS is kind of a good anchor for knowing where the most recent version of that data happens to be. You'll always be able to get access to the prior versions of a listing, but that might not be the one that you want to exercise your transaction against. And IPNS will help differentiate that and make sure that you always have the latest and greatest at the cost of speed.
Yeah, thank you, Mike and Josh, for clarifying that. And if anyone has thoughts on the right way to do that trade-off, we welcome them in the Slack. Since we've heard from so many people about the poor user experience of having to wait so long to load them, it sounds like we're leaning toward switching it to IPFS calls and having things in place to hopefully have more updated content from these search providers, which would be relying a little bit more on them. But again, if we do the IPNS calls in the background after the IPFS call, hopefully stale data will be detected at that point, and there shouldn't be much of a sort of a negative trade-off there. But that's what we're looking at now. Jacob Long in the chat asked us to talk about the purchase flow and whether or not we are willing to change the default to verified mods. This is a great question and a kind of a tricky one as well. So for those not familiar with the way the flow looks like right now, by default, if moderated payments are available, so both moderated and direct are available, I believe there is no payment option that's defaulted to. I may be wrong in saying that, but I think that's accurate. However, if there is no moderated payment available, if there's no escrow agent available, then the default of direct, which would be the only thing you could do, is selected already. And what we've seen is some people, because there is disclaimer text about using direct payments because they're dangerous. There's no escrow at all. Once the money's gone, it's gone. So you have to fully trust the vendor. But what I think we're seeing is because it's selected by default, people aren't clicking onto that and not noticing that disclaimer text. And so some people have sent funds off into the ether and they're just gone, not understanding that's what they did. So we are looking into changing the design such that that will not happen. Josh, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so Sam, we actually do select direct payment by default, even if there are moderators available.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
The reason is the moderators have to be loaded, and we have no guarantee that the moderators for any particular listing will actually load. So when you first begin the purchase process, there are no moderators, and they're in the process of attempting to load. And it may be the case that none of them load ever, because they may not be reachable on the network. And so it became very confusing to be stuck in that state and then not sure if you should click on, wait to see if you should click on a moderator or click on direct. or people would just go straight to pay and then they get an error message. And it's just a very complex flow to try to deal with.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Josh. Jacob Long asks, can the store not provide?
It does.
Yeah, it does.
But that's all it provides. So we did a very long time ago actually have it set so it would show you a bar for each loading moderator with just their peer ID. But our design team thought that was really ugly, so we got rid of that.
So there's a few things that we can do to sort of improve this problem. Some of them are relatively simple and some aren't. One is to simply not have a default selection at all, forcing the user to click on it and hopefully drawing their attention to the disclaimer text and getting them to understand the risks. That is a relatively simple thing to do, and it's what I suggest. I opened an issue on the design repo to have our design team take a look at this again, and that's one thing that I suggested. The second is improving the disclaimer text, or perhaps not even using the disclaimer text there under direct payments, but having even a more serious warning like a pop-up if you try to send a direct payment or something like that. I don't know exactly what, but getting the risk across better to the user in some way. And the third is changing the default to using verified moderators. Now, I think that is unlikely to happen for a couple reasons. One is what Josh described. Technically, it's difficult to know right off the bat if there are even verified moderators available. It takes a little bit for that to resolve. Also, not everyone has the verified moderators. But on sort of a broader point, we're always trying to build OpenBazaar in as decentralized fashion as possible to be as not reliant on third parties as possible. And right now, OB1, our company, is the only person offering verified moderator service. If we choose to default to that, then effectively OB1 starts playing a significant role in the moderation on the network. I mean, which we're already doing, but I don't think we want to push that further than where we're at. So for the moment, that seems to be a choice that we're not likely to make, but we are aware of the problem, and yeah, it's good feedback. And as you said, I think I just saw a chat message. This can apply to Haven. As I understand it right now, Haven actually does default, possibly even forces people to use.
Haven only allows verified moderators.
Yeah, OB1 verified moderators. As I said earlier, it is dependent on OB1 services, which is not the case for the reference client. So, good question, Jacob. I appreciate that. There's a few other comments that have come in. One is from Flavor Aid asking if there are plans for geographic search, for example, looking for a plumber within 20 miles. We have talked over the years about this a lot, and there are some team members who are really excited about getting this functionality in. However, it has not been a high priority, and we're also not certain how best to do that. So I think the honest answer is it's not currently on the roadmap to do this, but we do know that it would be really cool, and we would really want it to be done.
It's also a very large privacy problem.
Well,
the way you would normally do this is by using, for instance, a Google API, because it's not simple to figure out where someone's located completely within the app, and then do the calculations to find out how close someone else is completely inside the app. That's a pretty big task.
And I think that's the real takeaway, which is it isn't simple. This would be a significant amount of work to get done in a way that respects privacy,
right?
Which is fundamental to what we're doing. So I think it's something that we know is wanted, but there's not current plans on the roadmap to implement it. Now, anyone that's listening and really cares about this feature, of course, should be, I'm going to remind you that OpenBazaar is open source, and we absolutely would love your help to get this in there and not totally rely on us to do this. So anyone listening who wants to get geographic stuff in OpenBazaar, please reach out to us if you're willing to help. That would be wonderful. Let's see. Liggy in chat is asking what's the plan for Ethereum support public rollout, and that they would love to use OB with DAI, which I think is a stable coin based on Ethereum. So I talked earlier about where we're at in Ethereum integration. Initially, Ethereum is going to be usable as currency, and after that, then the ability to use other tokens will be added, as well as the OpenBazaar token, which is based on Ethereum. We don't have sort of a timeline. It's not going to be out in the 2.3.1 upcoming release. Ethereum itself, support itself, might be in the 2.3.2, possibly in the next few months. I think I hesitate to put out a timeline on when the token stuff is going to be done, because that requires some other like smart contracts and stuff that it sounds as though the audits have not been completed on those, so that's a bit more fuzzy and in the future. But I do know that there are, I know Washington, I'm pretty sure Washington specifically has said that he wants to support Ethereum stablecoin within the client, though I don't know if that's on the roadmap specifically, but I know it's a desire, and he has been the one heading up the Ethereum work. So is there anything more, anyone on the OB1 team that wants to add to that answer?
We're really close. But yeah, I hedge on announcing any sort of release timeline on that, just because there's so many details that end up coming out just in the testing part of it. But we are code complete, at least for transactional usage of Ethereum, and then tokens are not far behind.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the hedging comes from things like all of a sudden, oops, precision, is a huge thing that we, hadn't originally understood, and then we have to do some work to fix it. So Ethereum is, is substantially different enough from Bitcoin that it has been a lot of work to get in, but as Mike points out, we're close. Flavor Aid adds that he or she might want someone who is licensed and bonded, and if that were a checkbox, we could do that. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of this might be up to having third parties offer things like verified moderator service. I mean, I can easily see OB1 or anyone else adding on to moderator verification, adding vendor verification, right? And having bonds included. Like, that's absolutely possible. I mean, it's probably not going to be a core part of the OpenBazaar protocol itself, but like done by third parties on top is my guess. Again, as far as I know, no one has plans to do that, but it is absolutely possible to do that. And if anyone's interested in building that, talk with us, and it would be interesting to think more about that. Flavor Aid's mentioning that certain codes could be used for internal location search without an API. That's interesting. Thanks for promoting that. Also, there's not, I mean, we mentioned Google, but there are services other than Google that allow for geographic location and are better about privacy. So, I mean, there's certainly other options there as well. Looks like the rest of the chat is touching on things that we have already discussed. Are there any other questions about what we've been working on, what we will be working on, or just general questions? I mean, it's great to see this discussion in chat. If you have any other questions, go ahead and throw them up in chat, and I will attempt to answer them. While you do that, is there anyone here that is currently building on OpenBazaar or aims to build on OpenBazaar and would like to give an update or speak about what they're doing? And you don't have to use the microphone. You can put it in chat as well, if you wish. All right, I'm not hearing from anyone. If anyone, I see a couple comments coming, but if anyone ever does want to get feedback or get help on building on top of OpenBazaar, I'll just mention again, our Slack is the best way to do that currently. I mean, these meetings are only once every month, but we're constantly available in Slack. Rod mentions in chat that he's been working on a project for a few months that will be announcing, and includes a link as well, so anyone can follow that. Flavor 8 asks about Mineiro integration. Yes, so this has been ongoing for a very long time, that there's been a lot of interest from both the OpenBazaar and the Mineiro community in seeing an integration into OpenBazaar. So Mineiro is, again, it's not really a Bitcoin derivative, so it's been quite difficult to integrate. Also, the fact that it did not have multisig until very recently made it difficult to integrate. And the way multisig works still makes it difficult to integrate because it requires all the users to be online at the same time. That's my understanding. So I know that Chris on our team has talked to a Mineiro developer who's attempting to do an integration, I believe, and learn, if it was possible or not. I don't remember the takeaway from that other than it might be possible for direct payments, but probably not viable for multi-sig payments, at least not initially. But I think there is still work being done to do so, not on our end, but on their end. Does anyone else on the call have more details on Mineiro stuff?
Yeah, I don't have many more details, but you have effectively the gist. I mentioned in the chat that Brian and I and Stevie had a quick chat with someone from the Mineiro Talk podcast that goes into a lot more detail about where we're at with that. But on the technical end, there are use cases in the OpenBazaar purchase flow that cannot be supported by Mineiro yet. And there are a couple of devs in our public Slack that are poking and exploring that. So if you guys are interested in participating in those conversations, join the Slack, and myself or someone there will get you plugged into that conversation.
Okay, perfect. Mike, if you'd be willing, if you could post a link in the chat to that conversation, that would be appreciated for posterity's sake. Excuse me. I also I clicked through the link left by Rod, which is zocos.com, saying that a big announcement is coming. They've been supporting OpenBazaar by the sidelines for a few years, and in a week, in actually 6 days, 20 hours, 14 minutes, and 25 seconds, they will introduce their project to help OpenBazaar adoption explode. That sounds very promising. In 6 days, I'm very interested to see what you guys are planning. So please, keep us updated. If you have anything or any questions, let us know, and I will be keeping an eye on that with interest. Okay, any other questions or comments on this call?
So Flavor 8 asked the question about OpenBazaar hosted services in the chat.
Yeah, I think Flavor 8 is speculating on what Rod's service might be. And just as a quick aside on that, we have in the past had people offer paid OpenBazaar hosting services. That was for the version 1, which was not based on IPFS, and you had to have a store online all the time to be reachable. And that folded when the 2.0 came out because it wasn't as needed anymore. Although there are still benefits to running a store all the time, so it may still be worthwhile. But I don't know. I'm interested to see myself. My curiosity is piqued. So I don't see any other questions or comments, so I'm going to end this developer call. Thank you very much to everyone for appreciating. I appreciate you attending. Thank you for the questions. For the zillionth time, I will again mention that our Slack, is open for all to join. You do have to apply because we did have a problem with spammers and stuff, but we should very quickly approve your application, and you can ask us anything you want about OpenBazaar there. Thanks to everyone again for joining. Everyone have a great day.